Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Drayon, and welcome back to part 2 of dealing with overpowered spells in Dungeons & Dragons. I found a few more tidbits of information that I could give you to help you with spells that you find overpowered. Now, I'm saying that with implied quotations because, well, they aren't really overpowered. And the first tip is going to explain why I believe this. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the tips. So, how are you going to deal with some of these overpowered spells? Well, the first tip I have for you today, and actually this is the most important tip, probably pause the video, grab a notepad, a pencil, and take some notes. This is going to be the most important tip. I'm joking about the notebook. Just keep these in mind. Especially this first tip. Tip number 1. Read. That's my tip. That's my first tip. Don't click off the video just yet. I have more to explain and more tips for you. But my first and most important tip is to read the spells, and as well as read the rules of Dungeons & Dragons. Yes, this does require you to do some extra work on your part, but reading these spells will actually result in you finding the flaws that you can use to your advantage to make them less OP, as a lot of people put it. For example, the Wish spell has this little tidbit of information here at the end, and I feel that when I hear about this spell being used, this part of the spell is never implicated, because they forget about it. To quote, "The stress of casting this spell, Wish, to produce any effect other than duplicating another spell weakens you. So say, I wish to become immortal. I wish this god was dead. Quote, after enduring that stress, each time you cast a spell until you finish a long rest, you take 1d10 necrotic damage per level of that spell. So, after using Wish for anything other than duplicating a spell, if you use a spell after making a wish, and don't take a long rest yet, until you take your long rest, casting a spell hurts you, the caster. So, say, for example, what's a good one? How about Healing Spirit? That's 2nd level. So that's 2d10 necrotic damage. Not exactly worth it, I might say. Especially if you're a wizard. You don't have much health. Especially when you get to the part when you want to make the wish. You're probably doing this as sort of a last resort. Maybe you decide to go with... what's another good spell? Mass Suggestion. I can't remember its spell level, but there's a lot of damage right there. 1d10 necrotic damage per spell level. That's a lot of damage. No pun intended here, but holy cow, why would you want to cast Wish in this case for that purpose? Just use Wish to duplicate another spell that you wouldn't otherwise be able to use. Use it for anything else, and you start feeling its effects. But there's more. This damage can't be reduced or prevented in any way. That's even worse. Furthermore, in addition, your strength drops to 3 if it isn't 3 or lower already. That's exploitable. For one, only having 3 strength, I've talked about encumbrance a couple of times. If your dungeon master uses the encumbrance system, and your player uses wish, and uses it for a different purpose other than duplicating a spell, their strength becomes 3. So they are unable to carry themselves. They can't carry their equipment. They can't carry their spellbook. They can't carry their robe. Nothing. They are dead weight. All you have to do is use the encumbrance system with the wish spell, and you have dealt with the problem. Not the immediate problem of them wishing the boss away, but holy cow, with these implications so far, why would you want to use the wish spell for any other purpose? For each, let's see, for 2d4 days is how long this lasts. For each of those days that you spend resting and doing nothing more than light activity, the remaining recovery time decreases by 2 days. So, not as bad. Finally, there is a 33% chance that you are unable to cast Wish ever again if you suffer this stress. So, that's kind of good. 33% chance that you won't be able to wish again. I kind of see the benefit of that, but again, that's still a problem. 1 out of 3% of the time, you won't be able to use Wish, but the other 66 point some odd percent, you can still use it. So, yes, there's still more of a problem, but just implementing this stress mechanic inside the Wish spell, 1d10 necrotic damage for every consecutive spell used, and your strength getting dropped? That's nuts. Additionally, you can use this with your own villains, Dungeon Masters. Have your villain use the Wish spell, and then proceed to kill itself by casting spells and trying to carry stuff around. It's going to be impossible, and you have more or less told your players, here's the rules of Wish, this is how we're going to be using it, and this is what's going to happen if you use Wish for any other purposes. Another spell is Healing Spirit. This is one of those spells that a lot of people have griped about, but they don't seem to have read it. To quote, until the spell ends, whenever you or a creature you see moves into the spirit's space for the first time on a turn or starts its turn there, you can cause the spirit to restore 1d6 hit points to that creature, no action required. The spirit can't heal constructs or undead. As a bonus action on your turn, you can move the spirits up to 30 feet to a space you can see. The spirits can heal a number of times equal to 1, plus your spell casting ability modifier, minimum of twice. After healing that number of times, the spirit disappears. Did you catch that? Or did you ignore it? you only get a set amount of times of healing, and the healing is only 1d6. When they first enter the spirit's space, or on the start of each of their turns while in the spirit space. So if you have a low ability modifier, let's say, you probably have a +3 at a minimum when you first start out. +2 if you're using the point buy system. So that's 3 times when you first get this spell. 3 times. What's the problem here? 1d6. 3 times. And it's gone. There's not any issue here. The final one I want to talk about is the Conjure spells, like Conjure Woodland Beans. The last sentence here before it lists what you can summon is, choose one of the following options for what appears. You don't choose the creature that appears. All you do is choose the challenge rating and how many are appearing. 1 challenge rating 2 or lower. 2 challenge rating 1 or lower. 4 challenge rating 1/2 or lower. 8 challenge rating of 1/4 or lower. That's it. That's the spell. You don't get to choose what creatures, just the challenge rating. The Dungeon Master gets that choice. So there's no pixies turning everybody into T-Rexes. That's not the problem. The problem is that people aren't reading the spell. Everything's been taken care of just by reading. That's the first tip. Now that I am done ranting, let's go ahead and move on to the second tip. For tip number 2, you need to take material components seriously. There are 3 components for a spell: verbal, somatic, and material. Examples of material components are fireballs, materials for bat guano, and sulfur. Or the spell Revivify needs a diamond that is worth 300 gold pieces. And that's for each individual casting, because this diamond is consumed by the spell upon use. So, if you take material components seriously, then players will need to find these items, and that is an adventure in of itself. In fact, players can have a mini scavenger hunt. They have a list of materials they need for their spells. During downtime, they can go and try to find these components, so that they can use those spells the next time they have to fight something. Or the next time their fellow party members die. They need these components in order to cast the spells. So that limits them on how many times the spell can be cast. So that means less often will you have the, oh my goodness, this spell is too powerful. Just taking the material component seriously helps you as the Dungeon Master. Tip number 3. Let's use a little bit of math here. I have for you the spell Fireball and the spell Counter Spell. Your player wants to use Counter Spell on the enemy spellcaster, which is about to cast Fireball. However, they can't, because the caster using Fireball is over 60 feet away from your player caster. So Counter Spell does not work. For a little bit more calculation, you can also use the Pythagorean Theorem that everybody who is anybody has learned in school. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. I've talked about this before with dealing with flying PCs, and it still holds true when dealing with overpowered spells. Counterspell is useless if it's not within range of the enemy spellcaster. So using that to your advantage will also help you. Just stay out of range of some of these spells, and your spellcasters or creatures are safe from your player's overpowered spells. I would only use this for some more difficult enemies, like do that for a flying boss, or a enemy spellcaster that, like an archmage or a lich. Keep them at a range. That way your players have to think of new ways to get the enemy spellcaster to fall. Tip number 4 is, well, I'm sure a lot of Dungeons & Dragons fans know this line, go for the eyes. It's followed by the name of a hamster, but the line actually makes perfect sense for a tip. A lot of spells go by the different senses. Your somatic opponents are your hand gestures moving around. Your ability to hear, your ability to smell, to touch, all of that is affected or used by a spell. And a lot of spells use this line. A creature that you can see. If you can't see the creature, or the object, or the area, your spell cannot be cast. So, like a tip I used in a previous video, use spells that nullify your character's ability to see. And there are a lot of spells that will help with this. If somebody can't see you, they can't cast a spell on you. So you're safe from that overpowered spell. Also, there is the hide action. If you are hidden, you can't be seen. A player might know where the hidden creature is, but they can't see that creature, so they can't target it. So there, that's number 4. Go for the eyes. Make sure they can't see the target. Tip number 5. Yes, you can stop your players from using overpowered healing spells. First, I used this tip on Twitter. A little sneak peek for this video. Using Chill Touch can actually help with some of these more overpowered healing spells like Healing Spirit. Again, we're targeting Healing Spirit because a lot of people have complained about this spell for no reason. To quote Chill Touch, on a hit, the target takes 1d8 necrotic damage, and it can't regain hit points until the start of your next turn. Until then, the hand clings to the target. Chill Touch stops healing until the start of your next turn. That's great. That helps us. So Healing Spirit is unable to heal the target within its space. Great! Now, on the player who casts Healing Spirit's turn, they use their action to move the spirit away to another target. And if you happen to be using Metamagic Adept's Twin Spell, that's 2 targets that can't be healed. So that limits that caster's using of the spell. Also, there are creatures that can use abilities that don't require you to need to heal. For example, the Mummy and the Demi-Lich, they drop the maximum hit points. So there is no healing beyond that. Let's say the Barbarian has 15 hit points. If the Demi-Lich knocks down the maximum to a 8, then you can't heal beyond 8. That's good for you. Not so good for your players because they need to think of what to do next. Sure, temporary hit points is a thing, but it's not going to bother you that much. All you need to do is stop your players from healing. Alternatively, you can use creatures that don't even target the hit points, like the Shadow or the Banshee. The Shadow will actually go against the strength. If a player drops to 0 strength, they're dead. The Banshee, if the Banshee's wail, then the players have to make a saving throw. Failure to do so kills them outright. Target anything but the hit points, or just target the hit point maximum, or just stop players from healing. You have conquered this overpowered spell. Moving on to tip number 6 is going to be decreasing the spell casting modifiers of your players. A lot of spells, such as Healing Spirit, is based on your spellcasting modifier. So if you don't have the correct modifier, then you're dead. For Healing Spirit, for example, you can only use it a minimum of 2 times before the spirit goes away. So using something like Feeble Mind, where the intelligence and the charisma scores become 1 upon a failed saving throw, that takes care of that problem, because a score of 1 is useless. Furthermore, with Feeble Mind, creatures can't cast spells, activate magic items, understand language, or communicate in any intelligible way. So, throw out a Feeble Mind and watch your players panic. There you go. That takes care of everything. Just using Feeble Mind takes care of a lot of things. Additionally, a Intellect Devourer has a similar ability. It slowly decreases the player's ability score. Intelligence, to be more precise. So your wizard and your artificer are going to slowly start panicking as their intelligence decreases, because they won't be able to use some of their best spells because they don't have a modifier anymore. For number 7, Immutable Form and Magic Immunity. Now, I've talked about immunities in my last video, but I want to go ahead and say it again because it actually goes with this tip of Immutable Form. Immutable Form states, the creature is immune to any spell or effect that would alter its form. So there goes True Polymorph, right off the bat. Polymorph, True Polymorph, altering anything is impossible with this ability. Magic Immunity states the creature cannot be affected or detected by spells unless it wishes to be. Limited magic immunity does this only to a certain spell level. This is great. This helps with some of your boss monsters, because a lot of the time when facing a boss, the players will want to, first off, get rid of the legendary resistances. That way, when they finally succeed on a save, the spell goes through. And when that spell goes through, your boss is now a lizard, and that they can easily step on it and kill it. There's the encounter, done and gone. But with Immutable Form and Magic Immunity, those spells are useless altogether. No saving throw required because you automatically succeed that save, because you're unaffected. How great is that? Just using these abilities will help your boss fights and help you against those pesky polymorph spells. Tip number 8. Make sure they are dead. Now, this is for more morbid and sinister dungeon masters, but this also works for your players as well. And I'll share why here in a second. But a lot of the time, players will go down and start making their saving throws. And other players won't worry about it because they might make their saves. So, throwing at your players the fact that they can't survive this battle will actually make them want to use their spells quickly, or other instances, like instant death upon dropping to 0. That is a lot of different creatures' abilities, like the Beholder from the last video. It has a death ray. You drop to 0 with that death ray, you're dead. Disintegration, drop to 0, you don't have a body anymore. If they are down from any normal attack, use something like Magic Missile to force a players to fail their death saves. Or petrify your players, and then they're now an object, so just have the creature attack the petrified object, and it's destroyed. There's no coming back from that. Unless you use a wish spell, which that's not its intended use, so you start suffering the effects of wish. Going back to tip number 1. You use these on your players, and you will have them rethinking their strategy. Furthermore, your players can do the same with your creatures. The priest of, I forget how to pronounce the name, Aboris, have a special ability of when they first drop to 0 HP, you get a special ability that raises them back up and they gain 1 new feature. Coming back up after dropping to 0. That sounds like the ability to have death saving throws. And I think this should be what you do, Dungeon Masters. Give your NPCs the ability to do saving throws as well. If they succeed those saving throws, they'll rise back up and be able to continue fighting or come back another day if they are left alone. If your players think that they've killed a creature and that creature ends up making their saving throws, it'll come back for revenge. And I think that's an valuable tip there. Again, don't use this all the time unless you feel it necessary. Moving on to tip number 9. Make resting more important. The definitions for short rest and long rest are found in the player's handbook on pages 186, and I currently have them on screen right now. If you want to pause the video and read them, go ahead and do so. Have you read them? Alright, good. Now, a long rest is going to be the most important one since it comes up a little bit more frequently than a short rest does. So if you look here, you need at least 6 hours of sleep and 2 hours of light activity in order to count as a long rest. If there is an 1 hour interrupting this sleep, then that long rest has to start over. And you don't gain any benefits from it. I've talked about exhaustion in the past, and this is implied with the long rest mechanic. Short rest as well. You get 1 hour of downtime and you got your short rest covered. And that's great, because a lot of spellcasters need a long rest in order to regain their spell slots. Only the Warlock regains all of its spell slots upon taking a short or long rest. Everybody else needs a long rest in order to regain all of their spells. The Wizard's Arcane Recovery only works on a few spell slots, and only on a short rest. Having a long rest is actually more valuable to your players who are able to cast spells. So if you can manipulate that long rest mechanic, you have a panicking party. Waste their spell slots, make them unable to long rest, and there you go. You have taken care of the problem. One of these ideas actually comes from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the infested territory. One of the effects from this supernatural environment is that bugs are crawling all over you, making it impossible to long rest. That's great. And actually, speaking of supernatural environment, that is our next tip. More specifically, the supernatural region known as Unraveling Magic, and Haslan's Wild Magic, which can be found in Von Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Make players think twice about casting a spell within certain regions. In Unraveling Magic, you have a chance of your players needing to roll on the Wild Magic Surge table, which I have conveniently placed on the right-hand side of the screen. If you have players roll for certain effects, they'll think twice on using spells again for the remainder of being in this area, because some of these effects are pretty odd and don't need a repeat. So I would recommend using this, again, not often, but enough times to where it probably should be pretty useful. Another one of the effects of Unraveling Magic is that an anti-magic field is created, which was one of my tips in the last video. On to tip number 11, Evasion. This is the rogue and the monk's special ability, and what they are mostly known for. When the creature is subjected to an effect that allows them to make a dexterity saving throw to take only half damage, they instead take no damage if they succeed, and only half damage if they fail. That's an invaluable skill. Using this on some of your creatures will actually help you with some of the more powerful damage spells. Moving on to our final tip is use your world lore. The spell Banishment comes into mind for this particular spell. And for our example, we are using the Chained Angel from Goldball Press. Banishment will not work on this angel if you use it within your lore. It's not native to the lower planes. It's not allowed back into the upper planes. Treat it as being native to the material plane, and Banishment, which states if the target is native to the plane of existence you're on, you banish the target with a harmless demiplane. While there is incapacitated, and the target remains there until the spell ends, at which point the target reappears in the space it left, or in the nearest unoccupied space. So they banish this celestial for 1 minute, which is 60 seconds, which is 10 rounds. They do what they need to do in the room, but once they do, the angel comes back and has them cornered. Oh no, says your players. How are they going to deal with that? And actually, that will help with explaining the world lore. Because what if you have a demon that's native to material plane? Are there any lower planes at all? Are the lower planes a part of the material plane? What's going on with your world to suggest that these powerful creatures are native to the material plane? Using your world lore will actually help you with a lot of these spells. Banishment being the most important, since that's something that gets a lot of dungeon masters riled up. Oh no, they just permanently banished my demon lord. What will I do to make sure this doesn't happen in the future? Well, this is. Your demon lord is native to material plane, or they happen to be in the lower plane, so they can't banish it forever. Oh no, what are we going to do now? Why is it still here? This will cause your players to think about your world's lore and have them strategize better. And there you go, viewers. Those are my 12 tips for you on how to deal with your overpowered spells without nerfing them. That has been a total of 20 tips with these 2 videos. If you still feel that these tips are not enough, let me know down in the comments section below on what spells I have not been able to cover with these tips on both the first video and with this second video. What spells are not taken care of with these 20 tips? Let me know in the comment section below. And check out my Twitter page, my Discord page, and whatever to be able to get more information on your Dungeons & Dragons campaign, or to help you with your Dungeons & Dragons campaigns in the future. With that being said, I have talked for quite long enough, going on 40 minutes now. So, until next time, this has been Drahan, and I am offline.